Coast Guard as part of her core group. She's really good friends with a lot of different people, and they respect her because she is so clear and passionate. Along with being student council, she also is heavily involved with our advisory board voices. And when she does have time outside of school and trying to make sure she looks fashionable every day, she is a, even though she wasn't chosen for being a good dresser, she is a very good dresser. She also is involved with tumbling. She used to dance. Sometimes she's playing my daughter in basketball on the basketball court. And she's brought a dance club with her too. She brought her little sister, Corey, and her parents, Kristen and Greg, and her grandmother, Marta. And Kirsten actually is a kindergarten instructional assistant at North Grove also. So yeah, so we're happy. You make an awesome representative of North Grove, and thank you for doing awesome work with us. So that's the first minute, designer.
All right, next order of business is adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mrs. Toomey. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. All those in favor of accepting the agenda as adopted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
So, reports. Dr. Arkanoff.
Thank you. This evening, we have a status report on redistricting, and Dr. Lyons is going to provide you with some additional information.
Thank you. As you know, a while ago, the board approved a contract with Cooperative Strategies out of Ohio to help us with our redistricting. Tonight, we have three different people. There we go. From Cooperative Strategies, Karen Daniel Hamburg, Tracy Richter, and Matt Sachs. Tracy will be giving the update. So I'll turn it over to Tracy.
Thank you, Dr. Lyons. Dr. Arkanoff and members of the board, thanks for inviting us here tonight. First of all, congratulations on building a new elementary school. What an exciting time. Great news of an exciting opportunity for kids to learn in a great environment and to change boundaries. So that's the reward you get sometimes with that. But that's exciting news for your community and for your students, certainly. We're not going to take very much time tonight. We're just going to give you an overview of the process so you're familiar what you're going to experience in the next few months as you go through the redistricting process, and we help you facilitate that. So the process is, for about a month ago, a little over a month ago, we met with Dr. Long and other staff members to do a plan for planning, where we outlined kind of a timeline, deliverables, kind of expectations that the district would have as us as facilitators of this process. Went very well. We feel like we've got a good start on this, including outlining some of the data, and I'm going to go through some of those things that we've gotten already and what we're expecting to receive really soon. We go through a stage we call options analysis, where we realize that there's more than one way to recreate boundaries, and so we want to make sure that community members participate in a process that allows them to develop options and scenarios that they can see there might be different ways to look at the district in the future. And then we really are focused on the transparency of this process. You didn't hire a consultant to come in to give you boundaries and tell your community what to do. That is by far what any district should do. We've come along here to assist in good data, a proven process of how to do boundaries in the future, but allowing your community members to develop it, help shape it, and make the decisions on it to give you recommendations as a board to move forward on this. So we're really excited to work in the community. And I hope that we see that this is as transparent as a process can be. We don't hide data. There's everything out there for them. to make really good decisions as we start this process. You know, as we go forward, we start meeting with a committee next month as we finalize some data. I think as any process that we walk into, and I'm sure you might have heard this because I've been doing this almost 20 years, and every time I walk in, there are people out there that think the boundaries are already done, you know, they're just gonna come out and tell us what to do, and that's not the fact at all. We are starting from the baseline of data. And so we're gonna work with a committee that, and I'll show you who's on the committee, but we're gonna meet with them several times through this process to make sure that they're checking data, that they're watching the process, and they're helping us communicate out to the community what's going to be done. So you can see some of those meetings. We intend to have a big community meeting in January where we invite everybody who wants to come and look at what we've done and what's gonna move forward. And then we wrap up with a few committee meetings and certainly updating you frequently through the process. So the background data that we develop, that we help develop and compile together, start with capacity. You know, the capacity of your buildings is important. And I think first of all, we realize that at the elementary grade level, you know, as the capacity is dynamic, it can be, but you have a range of capacity that all your schools can hold. But that capacity only changes when you decide it changes, by adding programs or taking away programs or changing class sizes, things like that. But we use a capacity based on your policies and your standards. And so there's a set capacity for buildings, and as you build Walnut Grove, there's another capacity added. And the idea is to balance the capacity across the district to be able to offer the equal programming that you want to offer at your elementary schools. Certainly looking at those facilities and where they're located and the neighborhoods around them and how they form that, which all goes into demographics, because it's not just as simple as adding just an elementary school. You're a community of growth, and that's good news. But again, with growth comes kind of uncertainty sometimes out there about how fast it's going to grow, where it's going to grow. But we have a lot of great data that, you know, the county and the city have provided us to make sure that we're ahead of those. We see developments that are occurring. We also know that there are developments that might be out in the future that aren't quite there yet, but we know that they're coming. So we're going to look to anticipate those. And so when you're doing boundaries, you plan for those. You know if there's big developments going to occur, that you don't build a boundary right away that fills a school immediately when you know there's growth in it. So we're going to pay attention to all that to make sure that the boundaries are long-term. And as you build a school, that those boundaries out there are long-term. And the other relevant data out there is certainly community input. We think that the community, you know, sometimes it's hard to call like just input data, but it truly is data. It's what your community's feeling. It's their input to what they see the future of these schools looking like as far as their demographics, capacity, size, and all that. So we think that's an important piece of data that goes along into this process. The committee that, now we didn't select the committee. We've actually just invited groups of people to invite into this. Certainly involves students, community members, teachers, staff, members from the community like business owners, government officials, those kind, trying to get just a big mix of people that represent all walks of life in your district. And we think that's important because everybody kind of has a different perspective from the seat you sit in every day. And so we want to make sure we collect all those together. This group will utilize tools that we have in place. We typically use what we call a geographic information systems network, where we're mapping data, we're mapping everything, and even the committee gets to use the GIS to make sure they're building the boundaries. So it's a very interactive program that we use also in this. And you can see, like in this chart, this is a district we use, and it's kind of small up here probably to the audience. But what we basically do is we'll take the district and we'll break it down into smaller, like really small, like catchment areas. And what the committee will end up doing is they'll just rebuild the district catchment area by catchment area. Now, by building one school, people might think, well, why don't we just move the boundaries of the adjacent schools? Well, we think that's probably not good short term. We think as you look across the district, looking at the whole district, now you may not change boundaries in a couple of schools, and that'd be great if we don't have to, because the less students we have to move, the better, obviously, less disruption. But we want to make sure that we're comprehensively looking at that so one school doesn't domino all the way up to affect that last school in the district. So that's really important for the long term. So we don't have to look at boundaries for a long time, and making sure that we can hold these boundaries as long as possible so down the road, because of growth or decline or whatever it is, we don't have to do it again to affect the student movement. In those catchment areas, you can see the interactiveness of the GISs is that you're gonna be able to see that they will have a tool that they can just drop down which boundary they want a catchment area to be in, and it automatically populates how many students are gonna be in the school and how that affects which middle school they will feed into, as to not make sure that we overcrowd a middle school because we changed a boundary to make it too heavy for either Central or North Middle School. And so we wanna make sure that we don't do that, because that can happen. You can draw a boundary and all of a sudden, one middle school got too big because you drew the boundary just a little too far. So it's very interactive and it's immediate. So when the groups develop those scenarios and options, and they're likely to develop more than one, because again, there's more than one way to build this thing up, they're gonna be able to see the immediate impact of the boundary change. So we will present those scenarios and options out to the community for feedback, and that's really, really important here, is that everybody has a voice in this. And so when we go out to the community, it's, the committee will serve as kind of the messengers out there. We work in small groups typically, and what we like is our committee to sit at each table with small groups and explain to them, you know, the complications of boundary planning and how they got to the conclusions of the options they got to. And we feel like, so we'll do a presentation, obviously, of all the data that went into it. But we feel like if community members sit with other community members who helped build it, they better understand it, and they're more comfortable asking questions than, you know, some consultant who comes into town to kind of show them everything. And so we feel like it's a very productive discussion, and questions get answered more personally than they do in a broad, like if you answer a question in front of 300 people, sometimes you don't get the complete answer you want. So we want to make sure everybody's getting a good, complete answer, and they typically get that in those small groups because they're working with community members who actually help build those boundaries. So it's a very interactive, again, community meeting. We also put the meeting online, so those who can't attend, I know we're busy people, so we put it online so people can look at the presentation. We do voiceovers on the presentation, so we describe what's going on, so people can watch a presentation and then answer the questionnaire online. So it gives us a chance for more participation, and we think that's a really good outreach for your community. So there will be a project website. We'll provide all the data, and the data will host the website. So every time we have a meeting, every time there's new data and the background report gets developed, it's online. The community can see every step of the process. Typically what happens is we leave a meeting, by the next morning it's going to be on the website. Whatever we presented, the agenda, the presentation, any results out of that meeting are always posted to make sure that people are always aware of the process going on. Karen is going to be day-to-day on this. Matt just kind of came along with us. Hey, we were actually in Hamilton Southeastern all day doing that fun boundary process, because you can imagine up there, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, you can keep that one.
Yeah, we'll keep that one, that's for sure. But Matt was along with us.
Changes every 6
today.
months?
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. That's what it feels like. They're always changing. So Matt was along with us today. He's leading that process. So we don't typically bring 3 people to board meetings for just overviews. So we're not doing overkill. I just wanted to, we weren't just gonna leave him in Hamilton for the night. So any questions you might have, again, I just wanted to thank you so much for letting us come here and just present the overview of the process for you tonight.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's an arduous process.
We'll be good. Thanks.
Thank you folks very much.
Let there be light.
Probably also too, good time to share that both Rob and Adam will be participating in the committee
Thank you.
involvement there, so thank you guys for
Figured I
Picking
still got
on.
some kids in the game too,
Yeah.
so. Look forward to it. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. There were no public comments tonight in regards to the agenda items. Next up is the consent agenda. Dr. Arkanoff.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. This evening, I'm recommending the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, next up, action items, approve the 2018-19 master teacher contract. I see Mrs. Haven snuck in the room, so Dr. Arkanoff.
Thank you. This evening, I'm recommending that the board approve the teacher contract for 2018-19, and I believe Mrs. Hoover is going to provide you with some additional information.
Hello. Tonight I'm presenting to you the 2018-19 teacher contract for approval. Starting on September 15th, we met, Mr. Alexander, Dr. Arkanoff, myself, met with 5 of our union representatives and their bargaining team to do some informal bargaining, and we reached a tentative agreement that night. And then on Monday, Monday of this week, the UTAG membership voted to ratify that contract, so it's coming to you tonight. Some of the key items from the agreement include a base salary increase of 3.6%, but that comes through 2 things: a 2% across the salary schedule, plus also row advancement for qualifying teachers, lane changes for educational attainment by qualifying teachers, and then also for those teachers at the top of the salary schedule, a $500 stipend because they can't get row advancement. Changes to the corporation contribution amounts for some medical options, which is just more corporate. We're taking on the burden and not our teachers. Also changes to the HSA contribution for the employee plus one option to go from $2,700 instead of $2,800, and that the new contract states that new employees hired after January 1st, that contribution for the HSA would go to $2,000, but only affecting new employees and not current employees. It increases the HSA contribution for the family to $2,500 a year. Includes some clarifying language for paternity leave and credit for military active service. Increases the ECA schedule for all of the positions on that schedule by 1%. Makes ECA changes. There were several of those that we met with a committee this summer and worked through those and brought those to for a tentative agreement. Those include adding a Category 14 for our middle school athletic directors, moving Category 12 positions to 13, adjusting some Category 12 stipends, and moving 6 of our high school varsity coaching positions from Category 9 to 12. Renaming our newspaper in both middle school and high school to instead publications, which is more appropriate. They do a lot of publications, not just newspaper. Adding middle school assistant coaches for tennis, moving all middle school head coaches to position Category 9, and making some small other various changes in the schedule. Additionally, we will provide a one-time stipend for certified staff who give their retirement notice by February 1st. We will provide a one-time stipend per semester for teachers who work at Bridges Academy. We also included a provision that would allow the superintendent the discretion to provide a one-time stipend in December. This is a 1-year contract just for this school year. The cost of this contract agreement have already been included into the 2019 budget, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Being the lawyer, I have to ask the technical question. Turn, if you would, to the second page up there. There was a piece the first full page, I guess, after the
After the context.
after the context.
That's awesome.
Was that the recognition section? There was a piece we had to give notice?
Yes.
So is this the correct version?
Yes. We had through the Indiana Employment Relations Board, we needed to make a change and revert back to some old language here, and then we're going to work with the Teachers Association to do, they've changed the guidelines and the rules a little bit, so we have to do a posting in each building, and we would change that language for next year, but we didn't want to hold up bargaining for words.
I appreciate that. I just want to make sure we're approving the
Yep.
right version, because you'd mentioned that to us before, and I was unclear as to if this was the right or if this was
This is
old.
the right version, yes.
Perfect.
It's the
This version
reversion
is
back
correct.
to
Leave
old
it up
language.
to the lawyer to ask the technical question.
That's why it's important you ask questions.
Not this lawyer, just that lawyer.
I asked
That.
him first, and he didn't know, so yeah.
I think they were trying to poke the bear about the herb, but go ahead.
It's just you. So North, I just want to, all I really want to say is thank you to everyone on the team, Beth, your whole team, for doing something succinctly, efficiently, and for the best interest of not just the teachers, but also for the students and the whole school corporation. This is important, but it gets you guys back to the job of working to educate our students, and that's the goal of everyone. So I really appreciate the hard work everyone put in this to get to this point. I think it's important that we recognize that we're all one team together working for the education of all of our students. And you guys did an excellent job on this grade. I'm glad to see the relationship growing and getting stronger every year. And I think that's excellent. So that's really something good. And it's unusual. It's not happens everywhere in life, right? So I think that's a great job. So make sure you let the rest of your team know. Congratulations on this too, Beth.
I definitely will, and they're cowards.
Not in,
I said, I know this is not appropriate, but I said, please come with me, because they're gonna thank us, and that doesn't always happen in public, that you thank us. And you said, you accept all the thanks, and I said, well, I need to bring a gift, though. You have to bring a gift, so we felt this was appropriate.
it's gotta be a
But-
ham.
So I'd like to present it on behalf of UTAG to Dr. Arkanoff and Mr. Alexander.
That's awesome.
And it's with a lot of love.
Go ahead.
And so thank
Are we
you.
emphasizing the love part, Beth?
It's a
Right?
Christmas ham.
It's a ham.
Love.
That's nice.
Ham, Griswold.
Thanks.
That's great.
Is that a
Great for a
bone-in?
good ham.
That is a good ham.
Oh, yeah.
And I did buy the one that you can buy tomorrow.
We do have budgets, you
This
know.
is wonderful.
Very quickly tell people who are just looking at it, like, they're all saying, I had a teacher have a dream.
This is awesome.
And she came to me and she said, you appear really happy. I said, I am very happy. And she said, but like there's money, right? And I said, oh yes, there's definitely money. And she said, we're not gonna get a gift, right? And I said, a gift?
Gift.
No, I don't think we're getting a gift. And she said, I had a dream that Rich gave us all a hand. Thank you very much to the board from my team. They really are doing important things tonight, and they couldn't be here, but I wanted to make sure to be here. So thank you all public for the incredibly generous offer, and we're just so pleased.
Beth,
Thank
how
you,
long have
Beth.
you been
That's
on
great.
negotiations?
Yeah.
Hey Beth, how long have you been on the negotiation team?
That's
Forever, Rich.
that's funny. That's really funny.
Since Chris Pratt was here, I was,
Before
on
me.
negotiations with Chris.
Yeah,
So with whom I spoke this evening, so, it's
at
been,
least
I don't know,
15.
15 years.
Yeah, I would
a
say,
long time.
yeah.
That's really funny.
And so this was really just a great year. Last year was a great year.
That was good.
I just need you to
glad you
understand
signed
how
up for
much
that.
the teachers appreciate this all. It's just a deep appreciation. Thank you. And I hope the ham.
I love the ham most of all.
That's the
I-
best part.
I,
You can find jelly the month and
I love the email that you sent. I got it while I was on my golf trip and I read it and I'm laughing out loud and the guys I'm playing golf with are looking at me like, what is so funny? I'm like, we're giving Christmas hams. It's fine.
That's good.
it was really, we enjoyed it.
We did. That's awesome, Beth. So please extend my thanks as well to your team. It has been a pleasure the last 2 years working with your team and, yep, nope, I understand and we're all busy and, it was a record, an hour and 43
I
minutes.
think that's what, I think hour
I
40.
don't even know.
That's
We
a
beat last
record.
year.
We beat last year.
That's all that matters.
I will just tell you that after 15 years, Jack, or whatever, you know, and I've been working with Dr. Arkanoff through at least about half that time, you know, I picked up on his little tricks. So when he says things like, we're gonna start marketing next month, and I'm like, is it good news? And he's like, it's just want everybody to be happy. This might not be a bad evening. See you next week. says, when do we have to start bargaining? Then I know maybe.
That may be the ham year.
That may be the end, yeah.
So it was,
That's awesome.
because of the offer that you put together, that he could present, and Mrs. Hoover, and Mr. Alexander, it really, everyone, on my team, the teachers behind me, there's over 200 of us, and they were, everyone is just so pleased.
Great.
So thank you again.
I guess I just have one more thing to add. Now, there's no way I can top the ham.
None of us will ever top the
But there's
ham.
one thing I want to add, you know, it's the team effort, you know, from the teachers, from the administrators, the team effort. So I think it's the whole advisory council that, you know, that what they put into this. And also Mr. Gabriel, Dr. Gabriel, sorry, what he does with the numbers to give us clarity as to, you know, what we can do and what we can't do. So I want to thank everybody and recognize Dr. Gabriel for what he does too. Because I think sometimes the guy running the numbers doesn't get recognized.
Sometimes do you feel like a magician?
Yes.
Beth, this year I didn't have to take him to the roof and turn him upside down.
I have to do that too sometimes.
Not that I've ever threatened to do that.
No, only annually.
I
He
will
can take
defend
it.
Paul a little bit. Sometimes we have to say no, so we can say yes to other things. And it's looking at the big picture that's really where we got at tonight. And that's really important, because it's not always fun.
No, I mean, there are a lot of difficult trade-off decisions to get made about some other things that, you know, we want to do, but recognize that that's not always looking at the bigger picture. And Dr. Gabriel and Nora and Dr. Arkanoff, Superintendent's Advisory Council, they spend countless hours, I'm sure, duking it out behind closed doors before the board ever sees any kind of final version. So Nora's smiling at me. So extend my thanks to all those folks. And Beth, the ham, perfect. That's awesome. So, all right, do I have a motion to accept, to approve the 2018-19 master teacher contract?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the 2018-2019 master teacher contract as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any other comments or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you. I'm going to my e-learning meeting tomorrow, so I'm going to go make lesson plans.
Thanks, Beth.
Bye, Beth.
All right, next up is approve the raise for level A, B, and C employees.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. This evening, I'm recommending to amend levels A, B, and C salary and wage schedules reflecting salary or wage increases, and Mrs. Nora Hoover will give you some more information on this.
So this evening, we are recommending a base salary and wage increase of 3.63% for levels A, B, and C in our statement of positions listed in the statement of benefits. This includes all administrators and all permanent support staff. We have 3 coaches' salaries that are outside the bargaining unit, and those stipends, we're asking for a 1% increase to match the same increase that the positions were given in the teacher's contract. This would be retroactive to the first employee workday on or after July 1st of this year. I will bring the revised statement of benefits for your approval in October, and salary changes would be updated in that. These salary increases have been built into the 2019 general fund budget.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we amend level A, B, and C salary and wage schedules such that eligible employees will receive a 3.63% salary or wage increase effective July 1, 2018.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments, or discussion?
Just for clarification, and if you said this and I missed it, I apologize. I'm fighting an ear infection, so I'm hearing some things tonight.
Okay.
The 3.63% is equivalent to the same thing that we're able to offer the teachers?
Yes, when you do row advancement and the base salary of 2%, yes. The
Okay.
same.
So we're asking for the same across the board in essence?
Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, next up, approve the 2019-2020 school calendar. I can't believe I just said 2020. School calendar.
Don't push it.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. This evening, I'm recommending that the board approve the 2019-2020 school calendar. And Mrs. Hoover will give you some more information on that.
I've been busy this last
Yes,
month.
you have.
So working within the parameters and priorities and preferences set by Dr. Arkanoff, the board, and the superintendent's advisory councils, in coordination and discussion with our UTAG representatives, I've drafted the 1920 school calendar so that you know those priorities and parameters were, starting in August and finishing before the end of May, making sure we all have, our kids have all of June and all of July off. Balance the days between the semester, which is particularly important at this secondary level. This provides a 1-week fall break and a 1-week Thanksgiving break, and then 2 weeks of winter and spring breaks each. The advisory council to the superintendent, the principals, the UTAG executive board have all provided input on the different options, and we are bringing to you tonight this final draft. And we've done revisions throughout the process with lots of input. I do want you to note that there are a couple of items on there that are to be determined. Typically after parent-teacher conferences this year, we'll set next year's dates. A lot of times if we want to make changes, we don't know about them right now. We know about them after we've gone through parent-teacher conferences. So we will do those this fall and publicize those online as soon as we can. I also know the high school would like to put an e-learning date on there. And so we would add that, we'd hope at the same time too. So families would have a lot of notice. I can answer questions if you have any.
How is the community involved in the calendar? I mean, how do they get input into it?
I believe it was 2 years ago, we did a survey, and that's when we moved away from a 2-week fall break and a 3-day Thanksgiving break and moved towards the 1-week fall and the full week of Thanksgiving break. And so I would say,
We've also used the president's group, and there was another group, Stacy, can you remember? I guess it's just the president's group with the PTOs and all that,
And how was the survey sent out? Just
electronically.
yeah, that one was sent out electronically to parents 2 years ago when we did a mass survey.
That's what I'm asking. Is it-
Otherwise, unless we really want to make some big changes to the calendar, it seems like a lot of people like knowing kind of ahead of time what we do, especially as we've put some priorities and parameters in place. We can pretty much, if we keep following those until someone says, well, we really would like to change, we try to keep a pattern.
Yeah. Well, I think 2 years in advance is good.
I'm working on the next one, by the way, already.
Can I ask a question just on that? I know this here, would it make sense to ever do more than just a year at a time to do it because I know in the past, when I first got on the board, we did that a couple times, but I think then we had some changes that we were trying to say, hey, let's see how it works, which makes sense. I just was wondering are we still in that, hey, let's see how it works year by year? Is it possible to do a 2-year one? Or is there a reason not to do a 2-year or 3-year one, for example, more than just 1 year? Is there a reason not to do it if we're not doing that?
Not necessarily, and I am working on the next one. I'd like to maybe bring that to you
Well, I
in the
understand, but I'm
wintertime.
saying, just at the same time, like, could you just do like 2019 to 2020, 2021 all at the same time, or is there, I think, maybe
Yeah,
I wasn't clear
one of the
enough.
things, we've done some different things in this year's calendar that we haven't lived through yet. We're doing an e-records day for the teachers and some things we'd
Okay.
kind of like to see how that goes before we keep adding it in 2 and 3 years.
So you're still in that let's see how it
Yeah.
goes phase. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fine.
But I really
I'm
do think-
neutral and I'm just asking. I mean, I'm neutral
I do
on-
think we'd like to bring it I would like to bring the next calendar, maybe even in the winter, early spring, a whole year ahead.
For
and start-
2021.
But after we get through some of the things we've not done before.
I do appreciate, I know this is a thing I'm not supposed to talk about. I'm not allowed to talk about this too much. The calendar, but I do appreciate the adherence to the June and July issue. I know just from my personal experience in life with other teachers that I have in my life and other schools and parents in other schools, that there's a lot of issues and mental issues of like, we're going to school July 25th and July 26th, just as a mental thing. So I appreciate that we still, even with the balanced calendar, we're able to do 2 real months off of school. I guess that's August 1st, but you know what I'm saying.
And
So,
for their part, we think that's good for kids, and the teachers for their part said,
Sure.
it's really hard to be gone, come in June, and then when you come back in July, say, I'll see you next month. Because I know it's more than a
Correct.
month, but
Right.
they would like that too, and when we can fit it in like this, I think we should do everything we can to try to do that.
And on this particular calendar, while we don't have the luxury of being done by race day, I do like the balance. I like the fact that we've got, a week in October, a week in November, 2 weeks over the Christmas holiday, and then 2 in March. It's very balanced, so I applaud that.
I appreciate the comment about race day. I would like that too. So it's a major holiday in my life.
That's all about, like, the next year, March 31st is the race, we're gonna be able to be.
All right, thank you.
Is that a guarantee?
Well, I might have to get her a Christmas ham.
99%.
I know where you can get a ham.
I get
Well,
a ham?
Okay.
Well, and I think there's there's 2 other parameters that you didn't put in here that I know that you have to work within, and I want to recognize is the state mandate of the kids have to be in school 180 days. That's, I mean, we don't have any choice in that.
We have to figure it out.
The other piece of that is the teacher's contract is 184 and a half days. So we have to fit both those parameters in there, and I would maybe suggest adding those to your parameters bucket as well.
I
So,
think they're in the longer document you get, they're not,
they're not in the short
yeah,
version?
they're not in
Okay.
the short version.
But I mean, there's multiple parameters that this group has to work within, and those are 2 key ones.
Yeah, this is just a great job.
Yeah.
This is leaps and bounds beyond when I first got
Where
on the
we
board a
were.
few years ago of how this is done. Frankly, the recognition of the board's parameters as well. I really appreciate the respect that you give to that as well. So to me, this is a great job. No one is going to be happy across the board, but that's just the way this beast is. But I think you've done a really good job, you and your committee and team, on balancing everything that you have to try to balance. So.
I'm just happy that first semester ends before Christmas.
Yes.
In the old days, you had 2 weeks of Christmas vacation, then you came back and took finals.
I remember.
Yeah, did you still have that?
That was in my day too.
Poor planning.
All right. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the school calendar for school year 2019-2020 as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels and Mr. Norman. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. And real quick, at the bottom, you can actually see the days are counted there. See the 180
Yep.
and the 184. It doesn't say as a parameter, but we
Right.
do list those, so, thank you.
So what are we gonna do when the
Thank you.
state says we can't go back to school till after Labor Day?
I don't know. It's gonna be
Don't
interesting.
tell me
Really,
you
it's
need to-
just not
You
talk
just had a
about
nice
170 days.
moment there, and you have to do that.
Awesome.
We just do it anyway.
Give him
Do what we
some-
want.
All right. Next up, approve resolution for purchase of property. Is this not Mrs. Hoover anymore? Is it Dr. Long? You're up.
I'd let Mrs. Hoover do that. I'm all right with that. As you know, to purchase land, there are certain procedures that we have to follow. Number 1 is the school board must adopt a resolution indicating the corporation's interest in purchasing the land. 2, the district has to appoint 2 appraisers to appraise the fair market value of the structure, and the appraisers must be professionally engaged in making appraisals or be trained as an appraiser and licensed under Indiana code. Number 3, the appraiser shall return the separate appraisals to the district, and the district will keep those appraisals on file for 5 years. There are 2 pieces of property between Pennington and, can't think of it. No.
Oh, back road.
Yeah, sorry, I had that. Anyway, over, just south of the school property, Hornaday, sorry, I couldn't think of it. So, over by Pennington and Hornaday, they both are attached to the current clinic, so it completes a section of land that we would be able to purchase. So we have to pass we are asking that you pass a resolution indicating that we're interested in purchasing the properties at 2977 South Morgantown Road and 4988 Pennington Drive. The resolution also permits us to appoint 2 appraisers, and it allows us to enter into a purchase agreement for an amount not to exceed the average of the 2 appraisals, and it authorizes us to sign or to execute the necessary documents. So we're recommending approval of both of the resolutions tonight.
What was the street address for Hornaday?
It is, it's 4988 Pennington Drive and 2977 South Morgantown. That's kind of that what we always, the Pennington neighborhood.
Thank you.
And the plan is to, when purchased, to do what we've done with the other similar properties we bought in that area and on Morgantown Road as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that is to tear it down in case anybody was, especially the one
Next to.
east of the clinic.
East of the clinic.
All right. Do I have a motion?
I move that we.
Go ahead, Jack.
I move that we approve the resolutions to purchase property as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Any other comments or questions?
I'm just glad that we're still continuing on being proactive in buying land that for future, this could be 20 or 30 years down the road that we will need that land, but it's better to be ahead of it than trying to catch up.
And I know, Dr. Long, this takes a lot of time out of your work week, your work month, and sometimes work day, so we appreciate your efforts and being always on the lookout for our ability to take a landlocked school and look to expand where we can someday.
Thank you.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Next up, approve school improvement plans. Dr. Arkanoff.
Thank you. This evening, I'm recommending that the board approve the 2018-19 school improvement plans, and Dr. Parker will have some information to share.
Thank you. Per Indiana code, all public schools must annually submit a school improvement plan. Also, per Indiana State Board of Education rule, plans must be submitted to the governing body. The application legal standard requires that each school submit their full revised 3-year school improvement plan on a yearly basis. And all Center of Schools received an extension from the September 14th deadline in order to incorporate ISTEP scores from last school year, as well as provide additional opportunity for staff input. And that allowed us to have all of these tied up nice and tight before we submit them to the Department of Education. School improvement plans, part of the continuing school improvement process. To be effective, the plan should be viewed as a living document evolving as circumstances change throughout the 3-year period.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the 2018-2019 school improvement plans for all schools as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Mr. Norman, any questions or comments for Dr. Parker?
How often do we do these? Is there a rotation period?
They are revised and submitted to the DOE each year.
Oh, it is
And
yearly.
it's a 3-year rolling plan.
Okay.
Yep.
Is this document a kind of a mock-up of,
No, that's something else.
this is something else, okay.
No, you received those electronically with your board packet.
Oh, that's right, that's right.
Just I brought the paper version of all the plans. They are much thinner than they've ever been. This was all schools because we worked throughout the year last year to develop a new template for our school improvement plans.
Thank you.
But that's going to be online or is online or once it's
It will
approved?
be. There is one tiny issue. The principals and teacher leaders wanted to include 2017, 18, ISTEP scores. And I need to ask Mrs. Parker if she would delay posting those because they had to continue the embargo for those, so we technically can't publish the ISTEP data part of those, which is gonna mess her up, and I'm sorry.
Next, we have a motion and a second. Any additional questions?
I could go with that, but.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0, and we will
Thank you.
patiently wait to have those posted until the ISTEP scores are no longer embargoed. Do we know when that'll be?
We don't, they extended it and they didn't tell us when that would be.
That's awesome. All right,
It's okay, but we've got some pretty good data, so
Good.
we're okay.
My guess is that they're trying to fix the 20-some thousand student
Yep.
mistake.
Yep, they did
all right.
Yeah,
come up with a way to do it. but
yeah, they're just gonna roll
They're
everybody
just
up.
gonna roll it up.
Awesome. Never mind. Next up, accept the RFP for the school beverage contract. Dr. Arkanoff.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. This evening, I'm recommending the board accept the RFP for the school beverage contract, and Dr. Gable will do the big reveal.
Big reveal.
I know he held off getting this posted out there to the last minute.
Kept it close to his
True,
chest.
He did, he kept it pretty close to the vest.
Trying to build up the tension.
Is it kind of the Pepsi Coke challenge? You just,
No, we didn't do that. We didn't do that.
It's on the board even.
Currently, we have a 5-year contract with Pepsi as the exclusive soft drink provider for all of our buildings. And on June 1st, we advertised for proposals to replace the contract. On July 20th, we received proposals from Pepsi and from Coke. We used the selection committee, you see there on the screen, in the business office, myself and Sandy London and Debbie Lee, and Shannon Maples from the food service department, and Scott Harris, who is a parent and president of the Band Boosters. The Band Boosters run all the concessions for all the activities at the high school, so they have a big involvement in this. And I can't say thank you enough for these people that have taken on some additional hours to put into this task that isn't really part of their normal job. The committee met with both vendors to evaluate their proposals. Both vendors then made some adjustments in their proposals, and both vendors responded to some written questions. This evening, we're unanimously recommending Coke as the vendor to provide soft drinks beginning October 15th for a 5-year period. And taste was not a criteria. In fact, there are a number of administrators, including myself, that have a strong preference for Pepsi, but we're just going to have to learn to live with this.
Maybe we finally wore Dr. Gabriel down, Jimmy.
So I have to sneak in my
Yeah.
contraband?
The criteria we did use are shown there. The total value to the corporation is probably the most important. There's some detail attached, but in summary, Pepsi provided an annual value of $88,680 over the 5-year period, and Coke provided a value of $98,919. I wanted to mention that I think you appreciate it when vendors come to support this. I wanted you to know that in the back, from Coca-Cola, we have Scott Martin and Greg Michael, two of the 3 people that were involved in all the meetings we had on this RFP process. Second criteria was the cost of the products that we would pay, and food service and the concession stands buy the largest quantities of product, mostly water, juice, Gatorade, and of course carbonated soft drinks at the concession stand. We compared the highest volume of equivalent products and found that Coca-Cola's prices were just slightly lower than Pepsi's, and again, there's some detail attached that provides that. And we also considered their use of technology, and the committee was very impressed with Coke's use of technology, both in the machines themselves to track exactly what's going on in the machine. And Coke also has included in their proposal some digital signs for some of our concession stands that they would provide to us at no cost to us.
That's very nice.
That first time they've ever done that in a school building. We're really looking forward to trying some things there. The final proposal from Coke is attached, and it shows the areas where we had additional discussion and inserted additional language. And assuming that this is approved this evening, The administration will work with Coke to develop a contract in the next coming weeks. So this evening, we're recommending that the board approve the final proposal from Coca-Cola, authorize the administration to develop the contract, and authorize the board president and the superintendent to sign that contract.
Even better. Thank you, Dr. Gabriel. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we accept the Coca-Cola contract as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Toomey. Are there any additional comments or questions for Dr. Gabriel?
Is this until we decide to do an RFP again, or is it?
This is for 5
5
years.
years.
It
5
does
years,
allow
5 years.
the option of an extension if we chose to do that. We've had that on our existing contract, did not choose to do that. We haven't done that in the past, but it gives us the option if we would want to extend it.
Great.
Dr. Gabriel, when does it begin?
October 15th, we have a lot of vending machines and food service equipment that needs to be exchanged, and we intend to do that over spring break, over fall break.
So immediately, pretty
Yes.
much, as soon as we can get it done.
Yes.
And we are getting the one added to alternative school? Did we decide that?
There are some details like that that haven't been worked out, but I would anticipate there are a few locations where I think we've talked about adding a machine.
Yeah, that would be a definite plus over there.
Yeah.
And this is more a question for Dr. Arkanoff, probably, based on the past that we had when we, with all the different clubs, organizations, whether it's the swim club area, how are you going to ensure that this is communicated clearly and succinctly what they're supposed to use? Because I know there was an issue before, there's confusion, they didn't get the message, they were told once, but, you know, humans, we need to be told more than once. So what is your plan to do something?
Ways.
Right, what?
In 3 different,
Yeah.
proceed.
How are you going to ensure that what happened with the previous issue does not happen this time?
So Stacy and I have worked with the president's group with a communication plan to trickle down that
Okay.
communication out to, we have shared, and Dr. Gabriel comes to those meetings to explain that we're not going to be the police, so to speak, now the Coke police over this. However, we will communicate out exactly what's the expectation, what they should be doing, and that we'll be following up on checking and making sure. So if they do go to, what probably the biggest issue was the donated product. A lot of
Correct.
times the parents would donate just something, whatever it might be, and it would be the wrong product. And-
Right.
And so, so that was,
Water's
we,
the worst.
worked really hard with communicating them. The biggest issue we have with that is the volunteer portion of those groups change, the leadership changes. And in that change process, it's just one of those things where one leader doesn't tell the other leader, hey, by the way, you can't do anything but buy Coke products. And then they don't communicate that out to folks and when they're sending out the messages. But Stacy's done a really great job of pushing that message out and saying, you know, what we are now. We'll be doing a transition now from Pepsi to Coke and communicating that back out again. So this will be a really good opportunity to filter down that communication.
I would argue too that I understand the volunteer change, sometimes you don't know, but that's on us to make sure when there's changes, that there's some sort of regular, yearly, whatever you do, to make sure they understand it, revisit
Right.
it, go through it. And I know you don't want to be the soda pop police,
Right.
but I think at a certain point, we have to be at a
Right.
certain level. Because, you know, we're all in the schools and we see things, we want to make sure we're doing things the right way, so.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that there's a change from how it was done to how it's going to be done to try to fill some of those gaps that happen sometimes.
We actually started incorporating that change last year.
Terrific, good, I'm glad to hear that.
Is it fair to say, though, if there's some excess inventory, there'll be some time for them to be able to sell that off before it
Yes,
crosses over?
that's part of the contract language
Okay.
that,
Because I don't want to put the burden on them that they have
right.
to.
that
A lot of them have
there's
already
not-
bought it and expended the funds for it
Yeah.
too.
Anything we have on hand, we can continue to sell till it's
Terrific.
done. We just can't
Great.
I
order
appreciate
anymore
the-
from Pepsi.
I appreciate from Coke allowing that transition too. And just as a side note, my daughter found this out, she's a Coke fan, and she said, thank the Lord, so.
We will be taking a donation for Dr. Long, though, to continue
Yeah.
this habit, right?
We will have our own stash, just won't know where it's at.
So it's a new stash. All right, any other,
Mixing drinks. Pepsi's for drinking.
Just, you got it.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for all your work on this and working with the school. Dr. Gabriel, please extend my thanks to that committee that worked on that, and I know there was quite a bit of time put into that, so thank you very much.
We didn't take the votes.
I didn't think we did. All right, we have a motion and a second. I was confused. You wrote it down
You better
already.
get this vote over with.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
I thought Mr. Russell might vote
Just
no on
remember,
protest.
just remember I went with you on this controversial vote.
Vote versus.
Set aside your personal preference.
That's awesome.
Controversial.
I'm sorry, Bill. I
Thank
had
you,
to-
gentlemen.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
All right, next up is.
And you are free to leave if you'd like.
You guys can stay. It's the budget hearing. Dr. Arkanoff.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. This evening is the hearing for the 2019 budget. There is no action to be taken this evening, but I will turn this hearing over to you, Mr. Alexander, to run the hearing.
I'm trying to get this to where I can read it.
You got it?
Yeah.
I can't read it all.
Here you go. You want to see mine?
Yep. Won't fit on my iPad. All right. This evening's board meeting has been appropriately advertised as a hearing on the 2019 budget, the bus replacement plan, and the capital projects fund plan. I now open this public hearing. I'm going to call on Dr. Gabriel to provide a brief budget presentation.
Okay. Yes, the budget was advertised, this hearing was advertised on September 3rd, and that advertisement includes the address of our website where the budget's located. There is a lot more information available on the website than we could begin to get into this evening, including all of our prior budgets from the past 10 years or so. And then this evening is a hearing on the budget and the bus replacement plan and the capital projects plan. And as Dr. Arkanoff said, there'll be no action taken tonight. At our next regular board meeting on October 25th, the board will then approve all of these three items. The budget presentation includes a number of issues that I want to talk about. They're listed here. I'm going to go through these rather quickly, I hope. The first item is the fact that the state has done a major restructuring this year. Excuse me. Done a major restructuring this year. On the left, you can see the 5 funds that were used in 2018, and those are the 5 funds that have been in existence for the past 50 years. And starting in 2019, the budgets that we're adopting, or that we're proposing this evening, those are going to be consolidated into 3 funds. And there's been some switching back and forth between various expenses between the general fund and the capital projects fund. You can see that we have, in total, for 2018, we had $80.5 million available in those funds, and in 2019, we'll have $84.3 million. That increase is due to an increase in the funding rate that we get through the funding formula, and of course, the fact that we have additional students. And that's the next thing I wanted to talk about. This is a chart I include in the budget every year. Right now, our preliminary count that we took on September 14th was 8,428 students. That's up 153 from last year. That is still an unofficial estimate. We have about 3 weeks to resolve any conflicts with this data and any issues with the quality of the data to make sure that it's turned in properly. This is about 20 students less than our projection, which is not that bad out of 8,400 students to be off by about 20 for what we projected from a year ago. So the Capital Projects Fund is one of the specific things that this hearing is about. In the past, it was a separate fund. Starting in 2019, a few of the CPF expenses have been moved to the Education Fund, and the rest of the old CPF is in the Operations Fund. That makes it almost impossible to do a year-to-year comparison of the various categories of expenses. There is what's sometimes called a capital asset plan and sometimes called a capital projects fund plan. It's available on our website. It's been completely redesigned by the state and designed to only include those projects or assets that are $10,000 or more. Also, since 2010, we've supplemented our CPF revenue with general obligation bonds, and we'll do that again in 2019. These bonds are designed to support projects in our maintenance department and in our technology department. And you can see on these next two slides what those projects are. These categories are generally the same as what we have had in the past. And I'm not going to read them to you. There's slightly more information available on the website if you want a little bit more information about what these include. And back one, please, Ben. And I just wanted to say these are the projects that the technology department is going to be doing. You notice that there's nothing there in CPF because anything that the technology department was doing out of CPF has been moved either to the bonds or to the education fund. And just as a note, the total of these two slides for the bonds is $4.8 million. We'll be bringing those to the board for approval at the October meeting along with the rest of the budget. In terms of the bus replacement plan, it has been redesigned also by the state. It's now a 5-year plan, and you can see the number of new buses that we intend to be buying each year. The number of replacement buses that we intend to be buying each year for the next 5 years. And also, in 2019, we intend to buy 5 new buses. This brings the total cost of this plan to just slightly over $1.1 million. But we're buying those additional buses as we are preparing for additional routes that might be necessary. We don't know yet. But as we increase the number of students and open Walnut Grove next fall, these buses will be purchased if needed right before that school opens. Some other things that I'd like to mention. First of all, just comparing our revenues and expenditures for next year. Again, this is much different than what we've done in prior years. The education fund is $48,040,000, and it's balanced. The revenue and the expenditures are equal. The operations fund has a surplus of $60,000. Revenue is $60,000 more than expenditures. And this is going to be very helpful because in the year that's coming up after this, we'll have the expenses associated with Walnut Grove in there for an entire year. And we're going to need every little bit of extra that we can to handle the opening of that school. Debt service similarly has a surplus of $325,000. And that's going to be used to increase the cash balance in the debt service fund. We do that because the cash balance in this fund is calculated based on a formula that the state provides, and this is the amount of money that allows us to increase the cash balance in that fund to match what the formula provides for. A few words about tax rates. In the past, we've had 4 tax rates, and now that's going to go down to just 2, as you can see there. Approximately 42 cents in the operations fund and approximately 60 cents in the debt service fund. The education fund doesn't have any taxes that go into it. That's funded by the state formula. Money comes from the state. So our tax rate for next year, we are projecting it to be just over $1.02. But it's important to note that we always, in the advertisements and the calculations that we make, we increase that a little bit to guard against any errors in our estimation or in understanding the procedures. And of course, this year, that's very important as they've changed all the procedures that we're using with the new funds. This shows our tax rates for the last decade. We're proud of the fact that we've held them relatively constant. During this time, it's varied from just under $1 to just at 104. And again, next year, we'll continue to be in that range with just a very small increase, but to maintain our long-term tax rate to be very level. Just to show you how it compares to the other school districts in the county, we're pretty much in the middle of the pack. And this chart has remained pretty much unchanged for the last 5 years or so. That's where we have been in the past. We like to do a calculation of an example homeowner and what the impact would be on their individual taxes. And this varies greatly based upon where your home is located, because different locations have different total tax rates, and that impacts the tax cap calculations. But in this example, for this home valued at $300,000, as it says there, the taxes attributed to the school would increase by $21 annually for next year. And then I like to do just a summary slide with what the key points are from our standpoint on the budget. And you see it here. Accounting changes make year-to-year comparisons difficult or impossible this year. I'm really looking forward to next year because it's going to be a lot easier. A lot easier. The education fund is a balanced fund, balanced budget, and all three funds combined are up $3.8 million, which is a 4.8% increase. It's important to note that our enrollment numbers are still preliminary and at about $5,500 per student. If we're off even by just a handful of students, that can affect our revenue that we have available to spend. Our tax rate that we estimate for next year is just over $1.02, and that has an impact on this particular sample homeowner of $21 a year. That really concludes the information that we wanted to talk about tonight. As I said, there's a lot of information available on our website. You can go there to get more specifics. And that concludes my comments, and I turn the hearing back to Mr. Alexander.
Thank you, Dr. Gabriel. This is the appropriate time for members of the public to comment on the budget or the information presented this evening. Are there members of the public present who would like to comment? I now close the public hearing. Are there any board members who have comments or questions?
I'd just like to point out, it's pretty amazing for everything we've accomplished that the tax rate has stayed level for 10 years there and actually is almost the same as 10 years ago, yeah.
A little bit less.
A little bit less, actually.
Yeah.
It's absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
It really is.
When you consider the building and the growth that we've incurred.
Well, and that is a lot of hard work by Dr. Gabriel and Dr. Arkanoff and Dr. Long and their respective teams in putting a plan together and executing on that plan, and Dr. Gabriel telling us what we can and can't afford underneath that tax rate.
Yeah.
So, again, kind of like with the teacher's contract, there's been a lot of hard decisions made over when to
Several
build,
years.
what to build,
Yep.
what to fix, when to fix it. I'm sure Dr. Long might you know, that short summer break too, you know, he might be happy one of these days if we do, you know, run out of some money. He can't do as much over the summer, right?
I can't get it done anyway.
I see we have a parking lot.
Yeah, and it's live.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, please be aware that there is no board action to be taken this evening. The board will approve the budget at its next regular meeting on October 25th, 2018. All right, is there any other business to come before the board?
I do. Okay.
Mr. Russell?
Going to me first. Okay, as you may or may not know, tomorrow night is homecoming. We will be celebrating the oldest living alumni that we know of from 1938. His name is Sam Tinkle. Really kind of great to have that. The Alumni and Friends Group, along with probably Education Foundation, is holding the Center Grove Career Fair October 23rd at the Innovation Center from 3:15 to 8 o'clock. Would you like to talk more on that, Stacy? That's it all. We'll be sending information out on that one. But it's really a neat new program that's been developed by everybody here. You might receive a postcard in the mail or a call about alumni directory. It is bona fide. It's not somebody just off the cuff there. And they're doing the best they can with it. We're trying to collect that data to get a baseline. Center Grove Education Foundation had its Monte Carlo night, the second one, and good attendance. We hope for more next year. That's alumni. The Education Foundation had its Monte Carlo night. They are also holding a school board candidate forum on Monday, October 22nd, for the candidates for school board this upcoming election. And the fall grant cycle of 2018 will be starting October 1st. Went to the State Board of Education business meeting with Dr. Arkanoff, and the interesting part gets when they get to discussion and reports. And the 5 things that keep popping up are the diploma, the graduation pathways, and the really big one was the social, emotional, behavioral health plan, social and emotional learning, which is what we've been working on already ourselves. Assessment, and then unfortunately, we have schools in the state that need to turn around Academy Transition Task Force to come about. The ISBA conference was held recently. Carol was our delegate, and she has the booklet with the current info on ISBA subcommittees, especially the legislative information that ISBA is working on with our representatives and senators. And I believe that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Mrs. Toomey?
Well, I have nothing to add.
Mr. Norman?
Just had the C9 Governors Board meeting last Thursday, a week ago. Nothing too intense. We're currently working through a contract with the Sheriff's Department to provide more safety and security to C9. So that's a big impetus that we are doing at C9 to try to figure out how can we get that done with the budget that we have, and maybe do we contract it out versus, because we've had some problems with hiring the appropriate SRO. So we are working on maybe some alternative pathways there to do that. Exciting news, the auto collision department is fully staffed for Simon, and they've maintained more than 2 months. So that's been a great thing. So, and they did a presentation about that, and that's just, man, what a program they have there. It's great stuff they got going on there, and great kids. So it's, yeah. So good things going on at C9 still.
Mr. Daniels?
Nothing to add this evening.
I think one of my sub-duties that I have is, we talked about this evening around teacher negotiations. So I have quite a bit of free time over the next couple of months. One of the other committees that I participate in is the Economic Redevelopment Commission. There is going to be a special meeting, I believe, next Tuesday. Hopefully everybody saw the news about the Amazon distribution center. Hopefully, now that's a matter of public record, hopefully that will come to fruition, and I believe that is the bulk of our special meeting. We got some approvals that'll have to take place for that as well. So, announcements, October 15th through the 19th is fall break, no school. October 23rd, Superintendent Coffee Chat, 8 to 9:30 a.m. at Strange Brew. October 25th, we have a work session at 2 p.m. at the IT Learning Hub. And then we have our regular scheduled board meeting thereafter on October 25th as well. And we're adjourned.